Peace, love, and light. Good people, it's your girl Morgan Renee Myers tuning in for another reading of Centered Trading Your Plans for a Life That Matters by Jason Brown, former NFL player turned farmer. I'm going to get right into it. If you need to catch up on these reads and you're watching from Instagram or YouTube, Instagram or Facebook, go over to my YouTube channel, Morgan Myers, Myers. You'll see a red logo with a yellow M inside for my brand, More of Mine Edutainment Group. And tune along. Check out the story time with more of my playlists. All right, here we go. We're on chapter. Put the light over here so I can see. We're on chapter 5, and it's entitled A Different Sort of Field Goal. I've been humbled in my reflection. Ducey, which is his brother that passed away in war, he was in the army. Ducey, almost 7 years after he died, had challenged me like he always had. Be better than me, he'd tell me when I was in high school. Well, I didn't think I could ever be better than Ducey, but I could be better than me. Better than the me I've been in the past few years. But how? You don't walk away from an NFL career. No one does that. Even if I did, what was I going to do that was better? Naomi, our second child, was born in May 2011. But by that time, our family was crumbling fast. Tay and I did a great job of sticking on smiles for the outside world, and everyone thought we were a model couple. Loving, successful, faithful. We were playing the tune the world wanted to hear, but we knew that we were playing while the ship was going down like the violinists on the Titanic. Tay knew what kind of man I really was. She knew how selfish I was. She knew what a hypocrite I was. She'd had enough. By late 2011, Tay was researching divorce lawyers and drafting separation papers. I just hadn't been served yet. Day by day, week by week, our relationship had grown weaker and weaker. Our slights turned into fights and became more and more frequent until Tay and I were barely speaking to each other. There wasn't necessarily a single moment, but just the wear and tear of a partnership when the partners aren't in sync. Marriage is supposed to be about we, but somehow for both Tay and me, it became all about me. The NFL is hard on relationships. Every professional sport is. If you look at the statistics, according to the New York Times and Sports Illustrated, the divorce rate for pro athletes ranged between 60 and 80%, much higher than the national average. Everyone thought that Tay and I would be the exception, but we weren't. My marriage wasn't the only thing falling apart. The career that I had sacrificed so much for took a bad turn too. The Rams were in the middle of a miserable season in 2011. We go on to finish 2-14 that year, and when you're losing that often, those in charge are willing to try anything to turn the season around. Everyone's job is on the line, especially for the coaches. Late that year, Coach I cannot say this man's last name, Spagnuolo. Coach Spagnuolo, the same man who made me the centerpiece of his free agency pickups just a couple of years before, called me into his office and demoted me. I was no longer the Rams' starting center. I'd been a backup before, but never in my football career. Not in high school, not in college, not in the pros had I cracked the starting lineup and then been benched. I was devastated. I went into football as a business decision. I didn't grow up loving the sport, and I don't even watch much of it now, but football had been so good to me, and I had been so good at it that I put the sport on a pedestal. I turned it into an idol, the source for not just my wealth, but my happiness too. My identity and self-esteem were wrapped up in football. Again, do not love the world or the things in the world. My first love was supposed to be God, but somewhere along the way I'd fallen in love with football, and football wasn't loving me back anymore. I was failing as a father too. I'd come home from work exhausted, both physically and mentally. Many times I didn't give my family the best because I'd already given my all to the Rams. I knew I wasn't the father I should have or could have been, but I saw that particularly clearly around Christmas of that year. Now, we Browns aren't big on Santa Claus. We hadn't stuffed JW's head with visions of sugar plums that Christmas, but Tay and I barely saw him enough to stuff his head with anything. I was away most of the day. Tay was working full-time as a dentist. We dropped JW and Naomi off at daycare center around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and sometimes we wouldn't pick them up until 6 at night. In an average day, we could count on one hand the hours we spent with our children. We were handing our kids off to strangers, and those strangers were the ones teaching them. One night near Christmas, I came home completely exhausted. Kenny, I was gonna text you and tell you that I appreciate you. I'm still going to. We'll talk. But hey, good brother. Um, yeah, I was thinking about you. I seen something. I was like, dang, Kenny, a good brother. All right. So I'm gonna pause right here too. So to this point, when I was reading this chapter, the last chapter yesterday, it was called Faith, Family, and Fortune, and he was basically talking about how his mindset was transitioning to should he still play football, based on the lack of time that he had with his children and his wife, and how he never wanted to do that because that's what his father did to him, work so that he could help provide for the family. And I was given a suggestion that that's why if those of us that were like-minded and could form a tribe of people that we rock with, because I used to have an in-home daycare, so I know what it's like for parents to need that assistance so that they can work and financially provide for their children. But if we're living communally, if not in the same house, but on the same block, same neighborhood, same vicinity, so that we're not 40, 50 minutes away from each other, but we're around those that we love and can help raise our children, whether it be some of the elders help watch the children during the day, or if we're doing homeschooling, or if you're going to put them in public schools, that you have people that, you know, are part of like your family unit, your extended family, your tribe, to help you raise your children together and make money together and do businesses together, so that basically your lifestyle coincides in a way that you can spend time with your children and have that relationship. I think that it's just such a great thing for people to brainstorm and implement, and make their lives easier, because yeah, this ain't it. Living this way is not it. But hey, so yeah, one night near Christmas, I came home completely exhausted. I've been working with the backups and the practice squad. I was angry because I knew I would be starting. I was frustrated to be working so hard and still be sidelined during the game. The last thing I wanted to do that evening was turn around and be a good, attentive father. But 4-year-old JW wasn't having it. He had a job to do. Dad, he said, we gotta go outside. Son, I don't want to go outside, I said. I'm really tired and it's really cold. But we have to, JW whined. We've got to feed the reindeer. They'll never make it around the world if we don't. I noticed that JW was holding a little Ziploc bag filled with Chex Mix and pretzels and sprinkles, reindeer food, according to his daycare center. I didn't want JW thinking about reindeer on Christmas Eve. I didn't want him thinking about a bearded old elf handing out gifts. I wanted him to think about the real gift of the season. To remember that, as the book of James says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. Feeding these mythical reindeer and leaving cookies out for Santa Claus felt like idolatry. I wanted him to know that the only jolly fat man eating cookies in our house on Christmas Eve was going to be me. I sat him down and we started talking about the difference between what was real and what was pretend. Son, is Spider-Man real or is he make-believe? I asked. Spider-Man was pretty popular then, and JW had seen some cartoons starring the superhero. JW thought for a second. Make-believe, he said. He'd seen drawings before. He knew the difference between a drawing and a real-life person. Is Iron Man real? I asked. This was a trickier because, unlike the cartoon Spider-Man, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man sure looked real on screen. JW said, Iron Man is real. I'm sorry, son, I said gently. Iron Man's not real. We went through all his favorite superheroes. Some he thought were real and some he knew weren't. We finally got to Santa Claus, and I broke the news to him. Santa isn't real either. But then I asked one final question, the million-dollar one. JW, is Jesus real? JW thought about it and thought about it hard. No, Dad, he said. Jesus isn't real. Jesus is make-believe. That's when I knew I was failing my son. I was failing my family. Tay and I were so engulfed in the things of this world, we weren't teaching our children about the things that matter most. We were chasing success and fame and money, things that compared to God's greatness and his gifts might as well be make-believe too. It wasn't just JW who couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what was imaginary. I was guilty of that too. Faith and family, I'd always said. Above all else, faith and family. But I hadn't taught my family about my faith. Not enough. Down the drain. Not long after, I had what I can only describe as a vision. I was in our home's great room when Jesus painted me a picture of my future so clear, so vivid that it felt like it was in high definition. He showed me in that house all alone. That huge mansion was empty except for me. He showed me the brokenness of myself. He showed me the crushing loneliness I felt. Not only were Tay and I divorced, but I also wasn't even able to see my children or hold them or tell them I loved them. In my vision, they were nowhere around, not even in the same state. In that vision, I saw my brokenness. It literally brought me to my knees. All my life, I wanted to be in control, and for the most part, I had been. I took control of my life in high school and never looked back. I worked hard to drive my own destiny. I sacrificed so much to build the opportunities I built. I've been able to control everything, to fix everything in my life until now. My marriage was broken. My family was broken. My life was broken. I was the strongest player ever to come through North Carolina. I could squat more than 800 pounds, but I wasn't strong enough to fix this. I graduated from one of the best universities in the country, but I wasn't smart enough to fix this. This was the last position I ever wanted to be in. But you know what? It was exactly the position Jesus wanted me to be in. A position of complete surrender, complete humility, complete obedience. Jesus, I said, tears running down my face, whatever you want me to do right now, I will do it. I know that you can restore and redeem my family. I know that you can restore and redeem my marriage. Jesus, that's what you're best at. That's what you do. I know that I can't do it, but I know that you can. Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Jesus responded to me in a clear, audible voice, pour it all down the drain. I wrinkled my brow. That's kind of cryptic, I thought. What does that mean? I said I would do whatever you want me to do. Pour it all down the drain, he said again. I was still on my knees, but I turned my head around and looked at the liquor bar behind me. I saw all the bottles of top-notch alcohol lining the shelves, liquor I didn't even drink. Then I thought about all the symbolism of those bottles, how instead of lifting the name of Jesus up in our home, we've been enshrining the names of Captain Morgan and Jack Daniel. Pour it all down the drain, the voice had said. This was a start. I started uncorking and unscrewing every bottle at the bar. Gin, whiskey, brandy, vodka. I poured it straight down into the sink and watched it drain away. After I was done with that, bar stash of alcohol went to the basement and dumped the top shelf liquor out of that one too, including the 1,500 bottle of Louis VIII cognac. The walnut-colored liquid melted away in the sink, temporarily increasing the value of the St. Louis sewer system. Tay, who could barely stand to look at me at the time, heard the clanging of all those bottles and clomped down the stairs from the bedroom. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked at her, my eyes red from crying, snot coming down my face. "I'm pouring it all down the drain," I said. "Why are you doing that?" "Because Jesus told me to." I watched her face change. The anger and exasperation fell away, replaced by a look of utter, complete confusion. She had never seen me like this. I was a big, strong football player. I could control my emotions. I didn't show fear to anyone. But now, for the first time, she saw a different me, someone trying to obey a higher power. It caught her completely off guard. I'd like to say that our relationship changed right then, that all the wounds we'd given each other had been miraculously healed. It wasn't like that. She just turned around and walked away. But I surprised her. I showed her something she hadn't seen from me in a long time. Humility, submission. In that moment, a moment that might have looked crazy to most anyone else, I was once again putting faith and family first. In the days and weeks that followed, Tay could see that my change of heart wasn't a momentary thing, that pouring the liquor down the drain wasn't just an expensive and temporary moment of conviction after which I slid right back into the same pattern. She could see the change in me. She could see that I had been humbled, that I was serious about following God's call, and that I wanted to lead our family to a better place. As she saw that transformation take hold of me, her heart began to change a little bit too. She was willing to show me a bit more grace, be a bit more tolerant of my faults. It wasn't an easy transition, and it sure wasn't easy to ignore the world around us, the world that told us that everything we had and everything we done for ourselves was great, and that for anyone to say otherwise, even if that anyone was us, was wrong. But Tay and I began to have some difficult conversations about what we really did value and what we really should. As time went on, I started unpacking what I thought we needed to do. We've got to get back to our real priorities, I told her. Faith and family. Whatever comes after that, it comes after. Never again are we going to make decisions for our family based on money. Never again will we going to make decisions for our family based on the almighty dollar. We can't do that. So what does that mean? Tay asked. I don't know exactly. It might mean a lot of things, I said. It might mean that one of us will stop working. So who's going to stop working? She challenged. I spent 4 years in dental school. Are you going to quit football and be a house husband? Do the grocery shopping, take the kids to school? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. We're going to pray about it. But I didn't know how. Solid foods. I'd been calling myself a Christian my whole life. I'd gone to church since the time I was a baby, and I'd rarely missed a service. I praised the Lord. I read the Bible. But now, at the age of 28, I knew that even though I claimed to be a follower of Christ, I never stopped being a baby in faith. I was still, as Paul told the Corinthians, drinking spiritual milk. I wasn't eating solid foods. See 1 Corinthians 3:2. I was a really good football player, and I was really, really good at being successful in the world, but I was not a good Christian. So, how do you become one? If you've done church all your life and it's still not enough, what do? I thought back to my time in high school, how I transformed from an overweight kid to a football player. I trained and sweated and lifted and studied until I became one. I worked my tail off to get to that point. Every goal I've had, every dream I've achieved didn't come from dreaming or hoping. It came about through effort. Desire translated into time and energy. So when I wanted to deepen my relationship with God, I knew what it would take. Time and energy. I needed to work at it. I called it my spiritual training camp. The training wasn't as physically grueling as what your typical NFL training camp puts you through. But mentally, spiritually, it was a workout. It consisted of 3 things: fasting, praying, and reading the Bible over and over. Fasting, praying, reading the Word. I didn't even know how to pray, so I bought a book of prayers and read those prayers over and over again. After a while, I'd ad-lib a bit, deviate just a little, and try to say some more organic prayers. But those written ones were my staples for a long time. I read them aloud. I even recorded me reciting some of the longer ones on my iPod. When we'd all leave the house for an hour or two, I'd play those prayers over a loudspeaker while we were gone. And when we came home, you could sense the difference, as if our St. Louis mansion had been cleaned and detoxed of some of its worldliness. It was as if our home, through those iPod prayers of mine, had been anointed. Reading the Bible was a different challenge. I had been reading scripture all my life, but now I was reading with a purpose, with a desire to move closer to its author. And you know what? That author was moving closer to me too. As I read, I felt as if God was pushing my attention to a particular story in Genesis. I tried to move on. I'd read the Psalms or the Gospels for a while, but God seemed determined to point my attention to that very first book and the story of Joseph. See Genesis 37 through 50. Oh yeah, Joseph went through it with his brothers threw him down a hole and basically tried to off him, and then he went into slavery, and then he ended up becoming a king, and there was a famine in the land, and his family had to end up coming to him to get food. You're probably familiar with the story, but just in case. Oh. Jacob, a wealthy farmer and shepherd who lived in the land of Canaan, had 12 sons, but his favorite was Joseph. Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, so they sold him into slavery, and he was carted off to Egypt. There, through what the Bible calls the favor of God and a series of wild circumstances, he became the Pharaoh's right-hand man. Joseph helped prepare Egypt for an upcoming famine, and when his brothers came to Egypt begging for food, he revealed himself to them. Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life, he told his brothers in Genesis 45:5. Every time I read that passage, I thought, all right, God, thanks. And then I'd read something else. But God would pull my attention right back to that story. And finally, it hit me that God was trying to tell me something very specific. Jason, there's going to be a famine. He seemed to be telling me, you need to prepare. Ooh, the gardener in me. Yes. So I, in all my worldly wisdom, thought I knew exactly what to do. I ran to Sam's Club and bought canned goods and non-perishable food items and stuffed them in my pantry. My family and I were now prepared for the zombie apocalypse, but that wasn't what God was telling me to do at all. And he was pretty angry about it. He spoke to me just like Jesus spoke to Simon Peter. See John 21:15 through 19. If I had a Bible around me or another electronic device, I would look these scriptures up and read them, but I don't. So y'all look it up. John 21:15 through 19. Jason, do you love me? You know I love you, God. Okay, I want you to feed my sheep. Jason, do you love me? You know I do. I want you to take care of my people. But what did that mean? I knew he was asking more of me than just to buy food for the hungry, though I certainly had the means. He wanted more from me than to open up a grocery store. After I'd been told to pour it all down the drain, I've been willing to do anything for God. I was begging him to send me out like a prophet or a disciple of old. I'll cure the sick, I'll raise the dead, I'll risk shipwrecks and stonings. Just tell me what to do, God. But as I worked through the reasoning, I suddenly saw what God was calling me to do. What outrageous, ludicrous, crazy path he was ready to set me out on. Hold on a second, God. I said, you want me to be a farmer? Orchestrating the exit. Yep, God wanted me to be a farmer. But Tay didn't know. The kids didn't know. And the NFL sure didn't know. I still had 2 years left on my contract with the St. Louis Rams. I might not be a starter anymore, but my team was counting on me. And if I walked away from my contract, a contract that was still making me a very, very rich man, I'd have to deal with a lot of questions. If I quit football to become a farmer, most folks would think I'd lost my mind. So I asked the Lord for some help. God, I know you want me to farm. I said, you know I have 2 years left on my contract. Show me what to do. I know this is selfish to make the transition easy for me. If you do that, I'll farm for you. I know, He said, I know this is selfish, but make the transition easy for me. If you do that, I'll farm for you. That was late 2011. On January 2nd, 2012, after that miserable 2-14 season, Coach Spagnuolo was fired. Less than 2 weeks later, the organization hired Jeff Fisher as the next head coach, inheriting a team that lost 65 games in 5 seasons and had very little money through which to bring in free agents to improve the team. When a new coach comes in at the NFL level, he tends to clean house. He wants his coaches, his staff, his players. And he might have wondered how many players he could bring in if he got rid of my record-setting contract. A few weeks later, my agent called me. Jason, I want to prepare you for this, he said, assuming I'd take the news hard. Jeff Fisher and his staff are thinking about releasing a lot of the team's veterans, and you might be getting a phone call. Really? I said. Praise God, I thought. Hey, listen, Harold, don't worry about it, I said. If they release me, it's pretty likely that I'll hang up my football cleats and retire. The call from the coach came a few days later. I thanked him for the call and hung up. I wasn't upset or worried or angry, not in the least. In fact, I was thrilled. Jeff Fisher in his entire career has probably never fired somebody so happy to be fired. I was free to pursue what God was calling me to do in a way that to the outside world will look completely rational. I didn't have to quit and walk away. I didn't have to answer awkward questions about why I give up a multi-million-dollar career to be a farmer. I didn't have to worry about people calling me crazy. I was cut. It happens all the time in the NFL. Many players retire shortly thereafter. Some players go on to new, unexpected careers. Chicago Bears linebacker Brian Urlacher, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Brian Urlacher went into acting. New England's Patriot cornerback Ty Law opened a trampoline park. Former Patriots quarterback Drew Bledsoe started a winery. When Coach Fisher let me go, he took my job, but he gave me control of my own narrative. To the outside world, it would look as though I naturally just gravitated toward farming, following my grandfather's footsteps. It was time to tell Tay my crazy idea about ring. It was my agent, Harold. Jason, I know you're thinking about leaving the NFL, but you can't. I can't? I said, no, you can't. Why not? There are 3 teams that want you to sign to a long-term deal right now. Despite my prayer, God wasn't going to make this easy. Temptation. I didn't care what Harold said. I was done playing football. I didn't want to freeze to death in Buffalo or Green Bay. I didn't want to melt in Miami or sign a contract with the Denver Broncos and spend the next several seasons gasping for air. Only a handful of teams would have made me pause even the slightest. 3 teams, huh? I said, which 3? And when he named the 3, I paused. They were the top 3 teams. The only 3 teams that I would have loved to have been a part of. The Carolina Panthers, Harold said. I was a Carolina boy, born and raised. My family, my history, my roots in the region go as deep as white oak trees. I thought back to my conversation with Brew when I was preparing for the draft. The Panthers were my dream team, and if I signed with them, my parents could go to every game. They'd be thrilled. The 49ers, he said. 49ers were located in one of the most beautiful cities in the country, San Francisco. The weather is mild all year round. More importantly, Tay had grown up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I might be a mama's boy. I might like to stay close to family, but Tay's a mama's girl, and she always wanted to relocate to be closer to her own family. Jason, if you ever get an opportunity to play in the Bay Area, she told me numerous times, if you ever get an opportunity to play for Oakland or San Francisco, you take it. My agent said the 3rd team, the Ravens. The Rams had pulled me away from the Baltimore Ravens with their huge free agent contract. I would have loved to have stayed in Baltimore. If they would have matched or come close to the money the Rams offered me in 2009, I would have stayed. I got my start there, and I had my first real professional success playing for the Ravens. Wouldn't it be great to finish my career there? For many professionals, that'd be a dream. I was determined to follow God's will, and I knew that What he willed for me was to be a farmer. Part of me, a selfish part, tried to convince myself that maybe playing football for a while longer will fit in God's plan too. God, maybe I can play just a few more years, make just a little more money. Then I can go to North Carolina and be a farmer just like you want me to. Hey, maybe I could have my cake and eat it too. Deep down, I knew that wasn't what God wanted. He'd already made his will known to me clear as day. That didn't stop me from considering those other possibilities. You're not supposed to be here. JW and I flew into Charlotte to visit with the Carolina Panthers first. My parents met us at the airport, and I knew that signing with Carolina would make them the happiest mom and dad in the world. At the hotel, Mom could see that I was troubled. Is everything all right? She asked me. I wasn't ready to tell her that God was calling me to a different career, that he was asking me to scrap football for farming. I couldn't tell her that even this visit felt like a sin, as I was ignoring God's will to follow my own. Yeah, Mom, everything's fine, I said evasively, trying to pacify her. I just want to make the right decision. The visit went better than I could have ever hoped, unfortunately. The Panthers offensive line coach, John Moxco, was my O-line coach in Baltimore, and I liked and respected him. I checked out the weight room and the training facilities, and they were all top-notch. The Panthers finished 6-10 in 2011, but rookie quarterback Cam Newton looked like a star in the making, the sort of star who could lead a team to the Super Bowl. He did just that 4 years later. Head coach Ron Rivera, heading into his second year, had a reputation of being a player's coach. But when I walked up to Coach Rivera, an ex-linebacker and a huge man in his own right, and shook his hand, something weird happened. You're not supposed to be here. If you're curious as to what the voice of the Holy Spirit sounded like, it was a deep, rumbling bass. It was so real that I looked over my shoulder to see where it was coming from. And then I realized that Coach Rivera was talking. So we can go upstairs and work out a deal right now, he said. You ready? The voice of the Holy Spirit was still echoing in my head like the reverberations of a huge bell. No, I said. I just need a little time to, think about it. And I'm going to have to go. I was out of there quick. When I met my parents afterwards, they looked so excited. They figured their son had signed a new contract. My football-loving mom had the biggest smile on her face, a smile full of anticipation. Are we going to be Carolina Panthers? She asked. No, Mom, I said. I didn't sign a contract. I've seen my mom look more disappointed in her life only once before, when she caught me stealing when I was 14 years old. No one wants to see that sort of look on his mother's face. I was making decisions about my career, my future, but she and my dad had an emotional stake in that future too. All parents have dreams for their children. They want their kids to be happy and successful and secure. The NFL, with all its money and fame, offered plenty of success and security. To turn my back on that, well, who could blame my parents for being disappointed? I spent so much of my life playing the people-pleaser game. As much as I wanted to make my parents happy, I saw that desire to please people as a trap, something the world, not God, tells us we should do. That's true even when it comes to family and friends, those people who love you and want only the best for you. You want to see them happy. You want to give them joy. But at the end of the day, there's only one opinion that matters, and that's God's. Not my mother's, not my father's, not my wife's, God's. Thy will be done, not mine. The Holy Spirit made his wishes clear. I was done with visits. The 49ers and Ravens would just have to find someone else to play on their offensive lines. I knew what I had to do now. But even if my dreams had taken a new turn, my agent was still on the same NFL road. Shortly after my visit to the Carolina Panthers facility, Tay and I went to San Francisco, not to visit with the 49ers, but to visit Tay's parents. Soon after we arrived, I received an unexpected call. Hey, Jason, the voice said, I hear you're in town. It was Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator for the 49ers and the assistant O-line coach for the Ravens when I played for them. Greg barreled on before I could say much. Listen, I'm just getting back into town myself, and I'd like to have you see our facilities, man, see if we can work out a deal. I hemmed and hawed a little. Well, Greg, I don't know if I'll have my chance, I said. I'm out here to spend time with my family. Tay heard. Tay knew full well who I was talking to. Oh, I'll watch the kids, she said with a knowing smile. What she meant was, you need to meet with the 49ers because this is something that I've wanted for a long time, and if you sign, you'll make me the happiest wife in the world. So I agreed to meet with Greg. When I arrived, he told me everything I wanted to hear, every trigger word that might get me to become a 49er. You could be a part of something special here. You'll be one of the team leaders. We're about to build a new billion-dollar stadium. You'll be playing in the best arena the NFL has to offer. It didn't matter. As Greg was telling me all this, another voice was talking to me too. You're not supposed to be here. I got back to the hotel, and Tay was primed for good news. Tell me the words I want to hear, Hulk told me. Tell me you signed the contract. Tell me that I'm the happiest wife in the world. I shook my head. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not going to be playing for the 49ers. The smile vanished. Now Tay was angry. So what's the deal, Jason? She asked. You turned down the Panthers. You turned down the 49ers. You don't even want to visit the Ravens. Those were the three teams you said you wanted to play for. If you're going to play football, if you're not going to play football, what are you going to do? I took a deep breath and I spilled it. Dear, God is telling me that we need to sell our home in St. Louis and move back to North Carolina, I said. He's telling me to purchase some land there. God is telling me that. He's telling me that he wants me to be a farmer. Stony silence. What? Tay said finally. Then she slipped into sarcasm. JC, I'm so happy God is sharing all these things with you because he's not sharing any of this with me. I understood how hard it must have been for Tay to hear me talk about farming. I knew that this was this was as unexpected as getting struck by lightning, and maybe at first just as painful. But I knew that this is what God wanted for me, for us. And so I poured it all out. I told her everything that God had laid on my heart, even crazy calling. I told her about Ducey, about Joseph, about everything, about how God was healing our marriage and how he was redeeming our family and how he wanted us to serve the people in a very real, tangible way. I want you to feed my sheep. God told me this. I knew my football playing days were done. I was being called to a different field. New playbook. Tay sat there and listened to me. She listened to it all. She didn't buy into the whole dream, not right then, but she received much of what I had to say with grace and an open heart. She believed I'd heard a call from God. She knew how much I'd changed in the last several months, from a selfish, inconsiderate football player to a man who was trying to follow God as well as he could. She saw the work that God was doing in my life. As for the rest, well, she was willing to trust God and trust me. She took a leap of faith for me. She wasn't completely sold, and I didn't blame her. What a huge change I was asking her to commit to turn our backs on the comfortable lives we lived, the success and wealth we gathered, and dive into a new, strange life, embracing a career neither of us knew much about. It was a scary step for both of us, but I had an advantage. I knew that this next step was being orchestrated by God. I knew that he would pave the way for us. Tay wasn't in on those conversations. She just had to take my word for it, the word of someone whom just months before she was ready to divorce. It must have been terrifying. But the vows she took in 2003 to love, honor, and obey weren't just words. They were a solemn promise. And in that moment, what must have been one of the hardest moments of our marriage, she chose to embrace that promise. She had a faith like Paul's, a faith that can move mountains. People sometimes ask why I didn't just start a charity like normal rich people do. Use my position as a football player to draw attention to my problem of hunger. Use my money to buy food for people who need it. But that's missing the point. God didn't call us to throw money at the problem. He called me to be a farmer. He called me to this unique ministry. In that, I'm able to find peace and joy where I could not find those things before. The foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. That's 1 Corinthians 1:25 says. To the world, that leap that Tay and I made might have looked foolish. It might have looked just as crazy as David trusting a slingshot when facing a giant. See 1 Samuel 17:48-50. Or as crazy as Moses trusting in a plague of locusts. Or as crazy as a bunch of fishermen dropping their nets to follow a strange man with a strange message. See Matthew 4:18-22. For years, I tried to do everything through my own strength, my own power, my own understanding of how the world worked. What had it gotten me? A broken marriage, a broken family, a broken life. The world's wisdom told me I was a success. I knew it was a lie. I was a lie. I built a career on spray-painted grass and artificial turf. God told me to dig deeper, to sink my hands into the earth and pull goodness out of it. Then he told me to pass that goodness on. God had been trying to reach me through the story of Joseph, which he brought me back to again and again. Jason, I haven't been blessing you this whole time so that my blessings could stop at you. I've been blessing you so that my blessings could flow through you. See. I could see how true that was and how far I messed up his blessings. The most famous passage in the Bible is probably the 23rd Psalm, which begins with the line, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." King James Version. Everybody loves it when in verse 5 it talks about how our cup runneth over. And as Christians, we often feel how true that is. Every single one of us is a cup. Every single one of us is a vessel that God pours into, and that goodness spills into the people all around us. But in my life, when my own cup started to overflow, I'd say, hold on a second, God, and grab a bowl. When that started to run over, I'd say, hold on a second, and grab a pitcher, and then a bucket, and then a barrel. I didn't want to lose a drop of God's blessings. I wanted them all to myself. I didn't want those blessings to spill into other people's lives, into a wider world thirsty for God. Those were my blessings, mine. But God had been working on me. That wasn't the way blessings were supposed to work. It was time to let that cup runneth over. It was time to let those blessings flow. Wow, that is very, very unique. So going from being in the NFL to getting a closer relationship with God, and then hearing you need to go be a farmer, and then it working out so that he was able to be fired from his contract so that he didn't have to leave abruptly or break his contract. Then you're offered to stay in the league to 3 of your favorite teams, and you still choose to go farming, and he ain't had experience except from when he was a child. Wow, 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 wow. And his farm is beautiful, y'all. It's beautiful. I've been. This is how I met him. I went. Somebody was performing out there, son Queen Kelsey, a singer back out of North Carolina. And we went to First Fruits Farms for the performance, and he came and gave us a brief synopsis of his story and was selling his book. He was doing tractor tour rides of the property. He got 2 lakes out there, black owned. He was telling us he works with, I can't remember what organization, but feeding thousands of people food, the youth in schools. It was beautiful. I was like, wow. So I was like, I gotta purchase his book so I can learn more about his story. And so that is just so interesting. So this makes me ask you all, what is God putting on your heart that you're supposed to do? What gifts and talents has he blessed you with for you to pour into others, to use, to not bless only yourself but those around you? Have you gotten in deep prayer and consideration about that? And if not, maybe let this be a lesson or inspiration to figure that out. I feel like I'm on my path. I'm a gardener. I'm overseas now doing a garden work exchange for a couple, and learning all I can learn about homesteading so that I too can get into agriculture and learn how to feed my people and keep the money cycling with us. So thank y'all for tuning in. I will read chapter 6 another time. Peace, love, and light. Y'all have a good night.